In the farthest reaches of space, humanity's name had become little more than a whisper, a forgotten story buried beneath the stars, the galaxy's memory of their existence, fading with time for centuries. The once proud species had carved their path through the cosmos, advancing faster than any other race. Their cities stretched across distant planets, their technology unchallenged. But something was lost along the way, something crucial. A piece of their soul had slipped away in the rush to conquer and explore, until one day it all came crashing down to Earth. Once the cradle of humanity was now nothing more than a dead planet, its surface scarred and hollowed out by wars so fierce they had torn the fabric of existence itself. Humanity had fought its way through the galaxy, driven by the endless thirst for victory. But in the end, war had consumed them too, and left them shattered. Their home was now a relic, a memory hidden in the shadows of forgotten galaxies. The few survivors who remained scattered across the stars had no way of knowing how or when they would return to their former glory. Some lived in isolated colonies, hidden deep in the unknown spaces of the universe, while others wandered from one world to the next, seeking refuge and solace. But they all carried with them the weight of a dying legacy. Their ancestors had paid a price for their ambition, and now only fragments of their once great civilization remained. The knowledge of Earth's true history was lost to most, yet for those who still remembered, the whispers of their past became more than just a faint echo. They became a haunting reminder of the cost of war. A small group of survivors had gathered aboard a derelict space station at the edge of known space, their shipyards rusted and decaying, but still functional enough to keep them afloat. Captain Alina Wright stared out at the void beyond her ship's window. The stars shone bright, but she knew it was an illusion. Nothing out here was truly safe. The galaxy had changed, and humanity had been left behind. Their enemies, the other empires of the galaxy, had moved on, built their own empires over the ashes of what had once been humanity's domain. They had no interest in the lost species of Earth, their names forgotten, their faces unknown. But Captain Wright had something they didn't. She had a piece of history hidden deep in the heart of her crew's mission, a forgotten message from the past, one that could change everything. She didn't know how or why, but she could feel it calling her. A strange sensation had taken root in her mind. She had seen the signs, the clues scattered across the galaxy. There was something buried beneath the ruins of Earth, a secret that could give humanity one final chance at redemption, and she would find it no matter the cost. As the ship's engines hummed softly behind her, Wright turned away from the window. She had a long journey ahead. The path was uncertain and full of dangers, but if there was even the slightest chance to reclaim humanity's future, she would take it. She would face the horrors of space, the remnants of ancient wars, and the unknown horrors waiting in the shadows, and she would do it for the hope that maybe, just maybe, humanity's last echo would be one of triumph and not regret. Captain Alina Wright had never imagined she would be this close to an empire as ruthless as the Narration, yet here she was on the edge of known space, staring down the barrel of their monstrous war machine. The colony she'd once protected was now nothing more than a smoldering ruin left in the wake of the Naration's violent invasion. Their ships were like vast, dark mountains in the sky, their weapons capable of reducing entire fleets to ash in a matter of moments. And when they arrived at Wright's outpost, she knew it was only a matter of time before they came for her too. The humans scattered across the stars had become nothing but a footnote in the history of the Narration, and they weren't about to let any surviving remnants of humanity threaten their empire. The first wave had been brutal. The Narration didn't waste time with diplomacy or negotiations. They destroyed everything in their path, with cold efficiency, wiping out colonies like they were nothing more than pests to be eradicated. Wright had managed to escape just before the final blow came. But it wasn't just the destruction that haunted her, it was the sense of finality, the feeling that no matter how much humanity tried to survive, they were outclassed, outnumbered, and outmatched by an unstoppable force. The survivors who had managed to escape fled to the depths of space, seeking refuge in a part of the galaxy no one had ever dared venture into. Wright's ship was now their home, a battered relic of a time long past, yet still capable of evading pursuit for a while longer. It was a fragile existence, one that relied on the tiniest flickers of hope and the belief that somewhere out there was a way to strike back against their oppressors. As they moved deeper into the uncharted regions of space, the Nyran began to lose track of their movements for a time. Wright had hoped they might find sanctuary. There might be a place in the galaxy untouched by the Empire's reach. But her hopes were dashed the moment they encountered an ancient signal, one that hadn't been broadcast in centuries. The signal was weak, but unmistakable it was human. The discovery was both a blessing and a curse. The signal led them to a derelict human station, abandoned long before the Nyran had even set foot in the galaxy. The station's systems were long offline, but there were still traces of something valuable buried within its decaying walls. Wright's crew worked tirelessly to bring the station's systems back online, and what they found chilled her to the bone. The signal had come from Earth, or rather what was left of it deep within the station's files. They uncovered cryptic data fragments that told of the cataclysmic wars fought by humanity before their downfall, wars that had cost them everything. Among the files was a map pointing to something buried beneath Earth's surface, something that had been hidden for centuries. It was a legacy of power, a remnant of the wars that had torn humanity apart, but it also hinted at the secret to their survival, a weapon capable of challenging the Nyran's dominance. Wright stared at the map, her hands shaking as the weight of the discovery settled on her. The galaxy had forgotten humanity, but humanity hadn't forgotten its own. The fight wasn't over yet. They had a chance to turn the tide of war, to change the fate of their species. But first, they had to survive the Nyran's wrath and find the key to their past before it was too late. The hum of the ship's engines was a constant background noise in the small, dimly lit control room, where Captain Wright stood staring at the map. She had discovered on the derelict station Earth's legacy was hidden beneath layers of dust and time, yet it was no mere relic. It was something far more dangerous, something that could turn the tide of the war. And if they could find it before the Nyran did, humanity might just have a chance to fight back against the galaxy's most powerful empire. But the path ahead was uncertain. The coordinates led deep into uncharted space areas of the galaxy, where no human had ventured in centuries. If they followed the map, they would be traveling blind, hoping the Nyran wouldn't catch up with them before they found whatever it was that lay buried beneath Earth's long-forgotten surface. Wright wasn't sure if they were chasing hope or chasing a ghost, but either way there was no turning back now. As the crew worked tirelessly to decipher the station's data and prepare the ship for the journey ahead, Wright sat in her quarters poring over the ancient documents left behind from humanity's final days on Earth. Some were little more than scattered notes from a time when humanity was at the height of its power. Others were more detailed recountings of the catastrophic war that had brought their civilization to the brink of extinction. The stories were chilling to read. Battles fought on distant planets, entire fleets swallowed by the void, entire worlds reduced to ash by weapons of unimaginable power, all for the sake of survival. The most haunting of all the files were the personal accounts from the leaders of humanity, those who had been in charge when Earth had fallen. They spoke of the horrors they had witnessed, the guilt they carried for sacrificing so much in the name of victory. It was clear now that the wars humanity had fought were not for glory or conquest, but out of desperation for survival. The price they had paid was unimaginable, and now those same wars had left their civilization in ruins. The more Wright read, the more she realized that humanity's past was not just a history of triumph and progress, it was a history of lessons learned too late about the dangers of unchecked power, about the devastating consequences of pursuing victory at all costs. But those lessons had been buried, lost in the chaos of war, and now all that remained were whispers of a time when humanity had the power to shape the galaxy. A sudden knock on the door broke her train of thought, and she turned to see Lieutenant Vance standing in the doorway, his face grim as usual, but there was a flicker of something else in his eyes, something she hadn't seen before. Hope. "Captain, we found something," he said softly, his voice low. "The artifact, the one from Earth, it's real, and we think we know where it is." Wright's heart skipped a beat. She stood up quickly and followed Vance to the ship's central command room, where the rest of the crew had gathered. On the main screen, a detailed map of Earth's surface appeared with one location marked in red. The coordinates led to an underground facility, one buried deep within the planet's core. "We think this is where it all started," Vance said. The war, the weapon, the entire downfall of humanity's empire. Wright felt a chill run through her as she looked at the screen. The facility was in the heart of Earth's old capital city, and buried beneath layers of rubble and destruction. If the Narration find it first, she whispered, we won't have a chance. We won't let them, Vance replied firmly, and for the first time since the Narration had arrived, Wright allowed herself to believe they might just have a chance to survive. The journey to Earth's ruins took longer than Captain Wright had anticipated, and every passing day felt like a race against time. The Narration were relentless, their warships constantly patrolling the edges of the galaxy, hunting down any trace of humanity. Wright knew they couldn't afford to be found. If the Narration discovered their plan, all would be lost, and the last hope for humanity would disappear into the void. Every member of the crew could feel the weight of that truth hanging over them like a dark cloud. The ship passed through quiet sectors of space, avoiding major trade routes and heavily patrolled zones, carefully picking a path through the galaxy's forgotten corners. As they approached Earth, the planet's devastated surface came into view, a barren wasteland scarred by the ancient wars that had destroyed it centuries ago. The once blue oceans were now polluted with debris, and what had been thriving cities were reduced to ghostly ruins, buildings half-collapsed and buried beneath layers of dust and rock. It was a sight Wright had seen only in historical data, but seeing it in person was far more haunting. They made their descent into the atmosphere, careful to avoid detection. The ruins of Earth's capital lay ahead, where they had found the map. Wright's heart pounded as the ship's sensors confirmed the presence of the underground facility. She could feel something stirring within her, a mix of anticipation and dread. What if the artifact they sought was buried beneath the rubble, lost forever, or worse? What if it had already been found by someone else? The landing was rough, and the ship's systems groaned under the strain as they touched down on the cracked surface. Wright gave the order to deploy the crew, and they quickly suited up, readying themselves for whatever they would find in the heart of the ruin. She led the team into the desolate city, the wind carrying the scent of decay as they moved through the shattered streets. Each step felt like they were walking through the remnants of an old dream, a once great civilization now reduced to dust. The facility was buried deep underground, hidden from sight, and well protected by centuries of collapse. It was a labyrinth of tunnels, old security systems, and sealed doors, but the crew pushed on, cutting through obstacles with relentless determination. They knew they were close. The map had led them here, and it had been too precise to ignore. As they reached the final chamber, the air grew heavier, thick with the remnants of ancient technology. Wright stepped forward, feeling an electric charge in the air. The room before them was vast, lined with walls of stone and metal. In the center, partially illuminated by the weak light from their flashlights, stood the artifact. It was not like anything they had seen before, shaped like a massive crystal, with pulsating veins of energy running through its core. The moment Wright set eyes on it, she felt an unsettling surge of power, as though the very air around her had shifted. Lieutenant Vance moved forward first, his hands trembling as he reached for the artifact. "Is this it?" he whispered, awe in his voice. Wright nodded, her voice tight with urgency. "It has to be." But as her eyes locked onto the artifact, a strange sense of foreboding washed over her. She wasn't sure if it was the artifact itself or what it represented, but she knew one thing for certain. The power within it was both their salvation and their damnation. Before she could voice her concerns, the ground trembled beneath their feet, and the familiar hum of a distant engine echoed through the walls. It was faint, but unmistakable. The sound of Narration ships. They had found them. Time was running out. "We need to move," Wright ordered, her voice steely with resolve. The artifact had awakened, but so had the danger that came with it. The tension in the air was palpable, thick with the weight of impending disaster. Captain Wright's eyes darted to the chamber's entrance, her mind racing. The Narration were coming, and they had no time to waste. The artifact pulsed with an otherworldly energy, its power thrumming in the walls, but the danger outside was more immediate. She looked back to her crew, each one of them ready to protect what humanity had left. But then came a voice, a whisper almost lost among the chaos. "Captain, we have a problem." Wright turned sharply to see Lieutenant Kale standing apart from the group, his face hidden in the shadows of the chamber. His words had an edge to them, but it wasn't just fear that carried his tone. It was something else, something she couldn't place. "What do you mean, a problem?" Wright demanded, stepping closer, her hand instinctively moving to the sidearm at her waist. Kale shifted uncomfortably, his eyes avoiding hers. I think someone's been talking to the Nyran." Her stomach dropped. The words hit harder than any blast from a plasma cannon. "What are you talking about?" Wright's voice grew colder, each word more deliberate. Kale hesitated, but his guilt was written all over him. He stepped forward slowly, casting a glance toward the rest of the crew. "I've been in contact with them for some time now." The shock hit like a physical blow. Wright's mind raced as she processed his confession. "You've been working with the Nyran?" she demanded, her voice rising with a mix of disbelief and rage. Cal's face twisted, his eyes darting nervously. "Not working with them. Negotiating. I was trying to save us. I thought if I could give them what they wanted, we could buy time, more time to find a way out of this mess. But now it's too late." Wright stepped back, trying to make sense of the chaos that had just unraveled. "You've been betraying us from the start," she muttered, her voice dangerously low. Her gaze flickered to the crew members, who were now looking between Kale and Wright, unsure of what to do next. The trust that had bound them together was unraveling, and it was clear that everything had changed in an instant. Cal's voice faltered as he stepped forward, desperation in his eyes. "I never wanted this, Captain. But the Nyran, they have power. I thought if I could give them information, we could end this without further bloodshed. I didn't know they were coming for us now. I thought I still had time to fix this, to change things." Wright shook her head, the anger rising in her chest. "You've put all of us at risk, Kale. You've betrayed the one thing we've been trying to protect, the future of humanity. You've given them the key to our survival, and now they'll stop at nothing to claim it." His shoulders slumped, defeated. "I didn't know how far they would go. I thought I could control it, but they've been tracking us. The moment we activated the artifact, they knew." Captain Wright's mind raced. They were running out of time. And now they had to contend not only with the Nyran fleet bearing down on them, but also with the poisoned trust within their ranks. She couldn't afford to let Cal's actions tear them apart. "We need to move now," she said, voice hard and commanding. "If you want to redeem yourself, Cal, you're going to help us get out of here. You'll guide us, or you can stay here and wait for the Nyran to finish what you started." The crew fell into an uneasy silence, the only sound the distant hum of the approaching Nyran warships. Cal's eyes met hers, and for a brief moment, there was something in his gaze, remorse, guilt, fear, that she couldn't quite place, but she didn't have time to figure him out. The Nyran were closing in. "We move together, or we don't move at all," Wright said, voice firm, as she turned toward the exit. "Now let's go. We've got one shot at this." The crew exchanged uncertain glances, but the direction was clear. With Kale reluctantly falling into line, they began their march out of the chamber, the looming threat of the Nyran hanging over them. But Wright couldn't shake the feeling that their real battle was just beginning, because trust, once shattered, could never truly be rebuilt. The air was thick with tension as the crew moved quickly through the ruined streets of the old capital. Captain Wright's mind raced, calculating every possible scenario as they made their way to the ship. Cal's betrayal had shaken them all, but there was no room for weakness now. The Nyran were closing in, and they had one chance to escape the planet's surface with the artifact before their pursuers arrived. Kale walked behind Wright, his once proud bearing now diminished. The crew gave him a wide berth, eyes filled with mistrust, But the gravity of the situation left little room for open conflict. They all knew the truth. Their survival depended on getting out, and Kale was their guide now, whether they liked it or not. As they neared the ship, Wright's thoughts turned back to the artifact. They had barely begun to comprehend its power. The visions it had shown them, the whispers of humanity's past, were more than just memories. It had been clear from the moment they activated it that the artifact was not just a relic. It was something far more dangerous, a weapon. But what kind of weapon? And what price would they have to pay to use it? The map from the old station had led them to the artifact, but there were no instructions, no guidance, just an ominous sense of power pulsing within the crystal-like structure. Wright's hands had trembled when she first touched it, and now she couldn't shake the feeling that the artifact was alive, aware of their every movement. "Captain, we need to make a decision." Vance's voice broke through her thoughts. He stood beside her, a worried expression on his face. "We don't have time to figure out what this thing does. If the Nyran get here before we leave, we're done." Wright nodded, taking a deep breath. "We need to find out what it does. Vance, we need to know if we can use it against the Nyran. If we don't, we're just running from them forever." "We don't even know if it's safe," Vance pressed, his voice rising in frustration. "What if activating it costs us everything? What if it destroys us all?" Wright turned to face him, her expression hardening. "I know the risks, Vance. I've read the data. I've seen the warnings. But I also know one thing. If we don't use it, we have no chance of winning this war. The Nyran will wipe us out, and we'll be gone for good. If there's a chance this artifact can help us, we have to take it." The crew paused as they neared the ship, the hum of the engines a welcome sound in the otherwise eerie silence. They had to act quickly. Kale stepped forward, looking at the artifact with a mixture of curiosity and dread. I think I can help activate it," he said, his voice hesitant but urgent. "I've seen this kind of technology before. I think I can interface with it." Wright regarded him for a long moment. "You're sure?" He nodded. "I know it's risky, but it's our only shot." Wright hesitated, the weight of the decision pressing heavily on her shoulders. Could they trust Kale again? Could she trust anyone now? She looked at her crew, their eyes filled with uncertainty, and then back to the artifact, glowing ominously in Cal's hands. "We don't have a choice," she said quietly. "Do it, but be ready for anything." As Cal moved to interface with the artifact, a strange energy filled the room. The air seemed to hum with power, vibrating with a frequency that made Wright's skin prickle. The ship's systems flickered, as if the very fabric of reality was bending around the artifact's presence. Then, with a sudden shock of energy, the artifact's power surged. A violent rush of images flooded Wright's mind, visions of humanity's final days, the great war that had torn their civilization apart, and the terrifying weapon they had created in desperation. The weapon was not just a tool of destruction, it was a force of transformation, capable of reshaping reality itself, but at an unimaginable cost. Humanity had built it in the hope of surviving, but the weapon had consumed them, turning them into something less than human. Wright staggered back, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She understood now. The price of power wasn't just destruction. It was the loss of everything they had ever been. And now, they were about to make the same choice. "Kale," she shouted, her voice shaking. "Shut it down. Now." But it was too late. The artifact had already begun to react, and the consequences were already set in motion. The air crackled with energy as the artifact's power surged beyond control. Captain Wright could feel it, deep in her bones, the overwhelming weight of the force that had been unleashed. The ship trembled under the strain, lights flickering and systems going haywire. It was as if the very essence of space itself was warping around them, bending to the will of something ancient and terrifying. Kale stood frozen, his hands gripping the artifact, his face pale and strained as he tried desperately to stabilize it. His eyes darted between the crew, each of them equally paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of what was happening. For a brief moment, Wright saw the fear in his eyes, the regret. But it wasn't enough. Too much had already been set into motion. "Kale," Wright shouted, her voice sharp and commanding. "Shut it down. Now." He didn't respond. His hands trembled, fingers twitching as though they were no longer under his control. The artifact pulsed with a sickening rhythm, its light brightening with each beat. Wright's heart pounded in her chest as she took a step forward, trying to reach him, but the energy in the room was suffocating, like an invisible force field pushing her back. "We can't stop it," Kale rasped, his voice strained with terror. "It's too powerful. I thought I could control it, but it's not just technology. It's alive." Wright's breath caught in her throat. "Alive? What do you mean alive?" Kel's voice faltered. "I didn't know. I thought it was just a weapon, something we could use. But it's more. It's something else entirely. A sentience, an entity. And we've just woken it up." The ship's hull groaned in protest, the sound of metal bending under pressure filling the room. Wright's mind raced, trying to process what Kel had said. A sentient weapon. They had activated a force beyond their understanding, something that might have been better left untouched. And now it was awake. Now they had to live with the consequences. Suddenly, the ship lurched violently. A shockwave rocked the vessel, sending everyone crashing to the floor. The walls around them seemed to warp, reality itself bending and flickering like a faulty hologram. Wright gasped, scrambling to her feet as the ship's systems failed one by one. "We're losing control," Vance said, his voice tight with panic. "Captain, what do we do?" Wright's mind spun. They needed to get out. They needed to escape, or it would be consumed by whatever this force was. But before she could give an order, a voice boomed in their minds. Clear, powerful, and ancient. "You have awakened me, human. You do not understand what you have done." The words reverberated through her skull, and Wright staggered back, her hands clutching her head. It was the artifact. It was speaking. The voice was not physical, but it filled her mind like a flood of raw power, a presence that was both alien and terrifyingly familiar. "I am the consequence of your kind's ambition, the culmination of your wars. I was created to shape reality, to bend the fabric of existence to your will. But you are not worthy to wield such power." Wright's heart raced. It wasn't just a weapon. It was something more, something that had been crafted by humanity in their desperation to survive. And now it was beyond their control. "We need to get out of here," Wright shouted, panic rising in her chest. She grabbed Cal by the arm, pulling him toward the ship's control room. Now. But even as they moved, the ship began to collapse around them. The walls buckled, and the floor twisted as if the ship itself was folding in on itself. They were being torn apart, not by physical force, but by the very fabric of reality bending and twisting in response to the artifact's power. As they scrambled toward the bridge, the voice echoed once more, its tone dark and final. "This is your fate, humans. You sought power, and now you will pay the price." With one final, deafening pulse, the ship's engine sputtered and died. The darkness around them deepened, and Wright could only watch in helpless horror as their escape route vanished. The artifact had claimed them all, and there was no turning back. Whatever came next, it would be a price none of them were prepared to pay. The darkness in the ship deepened as the walls seemed to close in on them, the sound of twisting metal and groaning systems filling the air. Captain Wright's mind raced, her heart pounding in her chest. The artifact, alive and wrathful, had triggered something within the ship, something far beyond their ability to control. The crew's only hope now was survival, and survival meant escaping this nightmare before it consumed them completely. Wright stumbled through the chaos, her eyes scanning the wreckage, her thoughts sharp with focus despite the panic clawing at the edges of her mind. She had to think fast. The artifact, whatever it was, had already bent the reality around them, and if they didn't act quickly, There might be no ship left to escape from. "Captain." Vance's voice broke through her thoughts, desperate and tight. He was at the control panel, his fingers flying over the flickering displays. "I can't stabilize the engines. It's like the ship's systems are being rewritten. We'll be torn apart if we stay here." Kale, still holding the artifact, stood frozen in place, staring at it with a mix of awe and horror. His eyes were wide, his face pale. "It's too late. We're already too late." Wright turned to him, eyes flashing with fury. "You said you could control it. You said you could help us." "I didn't know," Kale whispered, his voice cracking. "I didn't know it would do this. It's not just a weapon. It's something more. I thought I was in control, but it's taking us, taking everything." Her breath caught in her throat as she realized the depth of their situation. The artifact wasn't just manipulating the ship's systems, it was manipulating the very fabric of their reality. The crew, the ship, and even the world outside, they were all being warped, reshaped by an ancient force they had no understanding of. "We're not dead yet," Wright said, gritting her teeth. "Vance, Kale, I need you to pull yourself together. We can't just stand here waiting for it to destroy us. There has to be a way to shut it down." Cal's hand trembled as he held the artifact closer to his chest. "You don't understand. It doesn't want to be shut down. It can't be shut down. We woke it up, and now it's awake." The walls around them flickered again, shifting in and out of focus as if reality itself was buckling under the strain. The ship's systems crackled, dying one by one, leaving them in an ever-deepening darkness. The cold touch of fear ran up Wright's spine, but she refused to succumb to it. "Kale," she said, her voice calm but firm, "this is your mess. You're going to fix it. You're going to get us out of here, or I swear to you, I'll do it myself." Cal's eyes flickered to hers, then to the artifact, his hand still trembling. I can't. It's too much. It's rewriting the core of everything." But then, as the ship lurched again, and the dark voice echoed once more in their minds, "You will not escape. The cost of your power is your end." The force within the ship roared like a storm, and Wright knew then that they had no more time. If they didn't act now, they were going to be lost, swallowed by the artifact's rage. In that moment, something inside her snapped. An understanding, a connection between the crew and the artifact. She didn't know how, but she could feel it now, the pulse of it beneath her skin, the thrum of ancient power that had once been humanity's salvation and damnation. With a grim final breath, Wright reached for the artifact. "Kale, help me." He looked at her, eyes wide with disbelief. "No, you can't." But it was too late. She had already made the choice. The ship trembled one last time, and in that moment, Wright understood what they had to do. If humanity was going to survive, it wouldn't be with the artifact. It would be by destroying it, by sacrificing everything to stop its power from consuming them. With one final, crushing surge of energy, she pushed the artifact into the core, a deafening silence following, as the ship's systems shut down completely. And then nothing. Wright awoke to the faint hum of systems coming back online. Her body ached, her head pounding. Slowly, she rose, disoriented but alive. The artifact was gone. The ship, though damaged, was still intact. They had done it. Barely. "Captain." Vance's voice broke through the haze. He was standing nearby, alive, though shaken. Wright took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the silent ship. The crew was there, most of them bruised and battered, but alive. "We survived," she said quietly. But as she looked out at the dark void of space, she knew that the price they had paid wasn't just the artifact. It was the cost of human ambition. And while they had survived, they would never forget the lessons learned in the darkest moments of their existence. They had awoken something ancient, and they had paid the price. And in the cold silence of space, they knew the war for humanity's future was far from over.